Summer Maelstrom by Kitsune Rose 16, Chapter 2, Family and Testing. After a minute of jumping, Naruto soon dropped from the rooftops and landed in front of a small shop with closed curtains at the entrance. "Here we are!" he shouted exuberantly as he let Summer, who was blushing, out of his arms. Secretly missing his warmth, the rose rounded on the blonde. "I could have ran on my own, you know," she said with no real heat in her tone. Naruto chuckled sheepishly and tried to rub the back of his head, only to end up rubbing Yang's, who leaned further into his hand. "Sorry, guess I got too excited." Summer sighed. "Honestly," she spoke in a mock exasperated voice, "it's like there are two children instead of one." "Wouldn't that make you a pedophile?" The blonde grinned cheekily. Summer froze as a comical look of shock overcame her features before she just sighed in defeat. "Let's just go." The trio went to the shop and opened the curtains. They were then greeted with a smiling "Ayame Ichiraku. Welcome to Ichiraku Ramen," she welcomed them. "How may I?" She suddenly stopped short when she took note of the blond man standing before her. Her eyes widened and she raced around the counter to embrace the Uzumaki with a joyous cry of "You're back!" Naruto smiled as he hugged back the female chef. "It's great to see you again, Ayame. I just got back today and ran into my old teammate and Granny Tsunade." "So you didn't come here first?" asked the brunette as she let go of the jinchuriki and gave him a mock scolding look, complete with a wagging finger. "That just won't do, Naruto. I expected better from our number one customer." "Hey, I did come here first. It just took longer than I expected." Naruto pouted childishly while Summer giggled at the obviously closeness the two had. The Uzumaki took this opportunity to introduce Rose. "Ai Minnie, this is Summer Rose. I met her during the trip and is new to the village." The chef looked to the silver-eyed female and smiled in greeting. "Nice to meet you, Summer. I hope my little brother didn't bother you too much." "Oi, I resent that," he complained while crossing his arms. "Hush you," silenced Ayame. "The women are talking." The blonde slumped in defeat while the girls laughed at his plight. "It's nice to meet you too, Ayame. I hope it wouldn't be too much trouble for Naruto and I to have a couple bowls of ramen." "Of course it wouldn't," answered a male voice as a slightly elderly man stepped out from the kitchen. "Welcome to Ichiraku's and welcome back home, Naruto." "Hey there, Pops. Man, have I missed your ramen. I'll take a large miso to start." The father chef nodded before he turned to Summer. "And you, miss?" "It's Summer Rose," she answered before adding, "and I'll have what Naruto's having." "Two miso ramen coming up," he explained before heading back to the kitchen, leaving the younger patrons of the stand to talk. "So who's the little one?" Ayame asked, referring to Yang, who was now happily sitting on her father's lap. "This is Yang Uzumaki," Naruto said. Ayame's eyes grew wide as she processed what the blonde just said. "That means that you're—" "Yep," Naruto answered simply, already knowing what she was trying to say. "And she's Yang is my daughter," he confirmed. "Then are you—" This time she directed her words to the Rose, who had, until now, been watching their interaction in amusement. That humor, however, vanished at the implied question. "Yes, no," Naruto and Summer answered simultaneously. The Uzumaki frowned slightly as the silver-eyed girl looked at him a bit surprised. "Yes," the blonde spoke more firmly this time. "She may not have given birth to little Yang, but that does not make her any less of a mother." As if to further cement this fact, Yang reached out with her small hands and said, "Mama." The word was so quiet, yet so clear, and it brought tears to Summer's eyes as she brought her sleeve to her face and wiped briefly. When she finished, she smiled brightly at the two blondes. "Thank you." Naruto leaned over and captured her lips in a short, passionate kiss. "Anytime." AMA, having gotten over the shocking revelation, watched the tender moment with a small smile. She was happy that her little brother had gotten the family he always longed for, but she couldn't help wonder what had happened to the birth mother. The group fell into a comfortable silence while they waited for their noodles. Eventually, Teuchi came back out with the ramen and Naruto ate it with his usual gusto, though he made sure not to look like a total glutton. Yang immediately followed suit with her smaller bowl, while Summer tentatively brought the broth-dripping noodles to her lips. After taking her first bite, she immediately enjoyed the symphony of flavors that entered her mouth and began eating at the same rapid pace as the two blondes. Both Teuchi and Ayame knew that they had just found another regular. After having two more bowls, each for Naruto and Summer, and one more for Yang, the small family left the shop with Naruto paying for their food. While giving Summer a small tour around the village, they ran into Jiraiya, who had finally finished his meeting. He informed them that Naruto, along with Summer and Sakura, will be tested by Kakashi Hatake as a three-man cell at 7:30 tomorrow morning. He was going to leave, but Naruto still had a question. How'd they take it? Jiraiya sighed. About as well as you'd expect, but after explaining that you wouldn't want to be pitied, they all agreed to treat you normally. Naruto gave the man a small smile. Thank you for that. I don't think I could handle any more pity. My friends back at Beacon gave me enough of that. Jiraiya chuckled. That's what I told them. The white-haired man scratched his head. Anyway, just do your best tomorrow and make sure to not stay up too late. If you do, well, a mischievous grin appeared on his face. At least remember to use protection. Then he was gone, leaving the two young adults a blushing mess. After recovering his senses, Naruto suddenly had an idea. Follow me. He grabbed the still blushing Summer's hand and led her towards the training grounds. More specifically, they made their way to Team 7's training ground, where the blonde was told they'd have their test. And this is my oldest stomping grounds, he said as he gestured to the area with a wave of his hand. We have access to all kinds of terrain, so we'll be in for a pretty hectic matchup against Kakashi-sensei. The Rose looked around as she thought back to the time Naruto told her about the first time he took this test. She frowned as she remembered the part of Naruto being left tied up against the post and not being released until late in the evening when Kakashi finally went back. She shook off those thoughts before sighing, gaining Naruto's attention. I know I said I was ready for this, but what do you think, Naruto? And be honest with me. He looked at her blankly for a moment, making her grow less sure of herself before she suddenly felt a flick to her forehead. Silly, he began with a grin. Of course do great. And of course you're ready. You have all kinds of abilities no one even knows about at your disposal. Not to mention you're insanely fast, so you could easily get out of the way of attacks. She was touched at the amount of faith he had in her, and she couldn't keep the slight blush at his sincerity. She smiled and gave him a small peck on the cheek. You'll be fine, Summer, he assured her. A foxy grin came to his face as she finished. If all else fails, we'll watch each other's backs and work as a team. She looked him in the eye, getting lost for a moment in those cerulean orbs before she smiled back and nodded. You're right. As long as we work together, we'll get through anything just like we did back in Remnant. Exactly. So relax. We'll get through this test and we'll pass with flying colors, he explained with a fist bump. She looked once more and matched his fist bump. Yang, not wanting to be left out, did the same, making them both laugh before they left the training grounds. Unknown to the family of three, a pair of pale lavender eyes laced with jealousy and sorrow had seen them. Her body quivered as a name escaped the shaky lips. Naruto-kun? On the other side of Konoha, a certain lazy man with pineapple-shaped black hair laced under the shade of a large elk tree on a hill. His half-lidded eyes were drawn to random clouds in the sky as they freely floated along with their chosen paths. The wind blew gently, rustling his green jonin vest. The man let out a sigh. This would have been the perfect time to take a nap if not for the insistent blonde doing her best to take his ear off. Speaking of said blonde, the man felt a sharp pain in his side. This elicited a grumble from the now slightly irritated man. Have you even been listening, Shikamaru? The girl practically screamed. All she got was a low grumble in return and a dismissive wave. Ino sighed loudly and muttered something akin to, "No good, lazy bastard." Shikamaru decided to ignore this. I asked if you heard about Naruto returning, a distinguished nod. Then you have heard about him having a kid? This caught Shikamaru's attention. He sat up with more alert eyes. Choji, who had been eating a bag of barbecue chips quietly, also paid more attention. Did he now? Ino nodded. Sakura told me about it. Apparently, the mom left or something. I don't know. I was still shocked about Naruto having a kid, so I didn't hear part of it. Anyways, now he is supposedly with someone else and is taking care of the kid with that person. The girl finished leaving the two boys shocked. Who would have thought that Naruto, of all people, would have a child first? Choji asked after a moment. Ino nodded empathetically. That's what I thought. I mean, we all noticed how dense that idiot was back then. Hell, he didn't even notice Hinata's massive crush on him, even though the rest of us did. And now he comes back with not only a girlfriend, but a kid as well, she said, astonishment clear in her voice. Shikamaru was quick to agree with her. Naruto was the last person he expected to have a child with. Suddenly he smirked. Unpredictable, troublesome blonde, he thought fondly and spaced out for a moment. Spar with Kakashi sensei tomorrow. Ino's voice cut into his mind. Huh? Shikamaru sounded, making Ino sigh, and Choji laugh. I said that Naruto, the new girl, and Sakura are going to have a spar with Kakashi sensei tomorrow. The Yakanama. The Yamanaka Harris repeated herself. You going? Choji asked. The blonde gave an enthusiastic nod and said, Of course. There's no way I'm going to miss it. Besides, I have to find out about this Misty girl. Ino's grin grew, and guessing from Sakura's reaction when I asked earlier, Naruto has become quite a hunk, she said before she started to giggle. Oh man, I have to tell everyone, they'll never believe it. And with that, the blonde girl was off, leaving her two teammates behind. So, Choji said after a moment of silence, Are you going to watch? After a moment of consideration, the lazy Nara nodded. Yeah, troublesome as it is, it would be nice to see the knucklehead again. Besides, he gave a long suffering sigh. Most of the rookie nine will be there if what Ino does what I expect her to. If that happens, we have no choice but to go. Choji hummed lowly. Guess we're going then, huh? Shikamaru sighed again. Troublesome. Blissfully ignorant of the news spreading thanks to a certain gossiping blonde Yamanaka, Naruto stands in front of the open pantry of his old apartment while scratching the back of his head in embarrassment. Summer stood next to him with an amused smirk gracing her lips, and Yang, who was currently being held by the rose, giggled at the funny look on her father's face. This moment might have been confusing for some, that it could have been so funny in a food cabinet. Well, if you're one Naruto Uzumaki, then this would be rather easy to explain. Instead of the usual canned foods that most would leave in their cabinet, the blonde Uzumaki had managed to fill the entire pantry full of different flavored packaged ramen. You know, Summer spoke up, pulling their attention away from the overwhelming amount of noodles. You always said that you had an addiction to ramen when you were younger, but this is ridiculous, she finished. Naruto slumped in depression. It's not that bad, right, Yang? All he got was a deadpan stare in return. This caused the blonde's depression to increase and a dark cloud to form over his head. River-like tears poured from his eyes like a fountain. Even my own daughter is against me. Summer swept dropped while Yang seemed confused. Mama Cloud! The young Uzumaki's attention was entirely focused on the seemingly random cloud over her father's head. You can see it too? The silver-eyed girl asked, slightly bewildered. She had thought it was something that her and her old team could see. It was amusing to her and Crow, but it always seemed to annoy Raven, which caused him to do it more when she was around just to get a reaction out of the otherwise stoic Bronwyn. Daddy seems sad. She changed her train of thought before she got distracted with too many memories. Why don't you cheer him up? Summer set the toddler down and watched as she made her way to the still sulking Naruto on unsteady legs. Once reaching her destination, Yang grabbed his pant leg and gave it a tug. Turning his attention to his daughter, Naruto nearly melted at the sight of her large violet eyes tearing up and the adorable pout set on her lips. Papa, up, she whined. Naruto, despite his immense willpower, immediately caved under the perfected puppy dog look his daughter had just performed. Sweeping her into his arms, the blonde's depression vanished, and he began rubbing his cheek against the small girl, causing her giggling cutely. Aw, who could resist such a cutie like you? Naruto cooed. I certainly can't. A large, seemingly inhuman growl erupted nearby. Blinking owlishly, the Uzumaki looked at Yang, who shared his expression, before they both turned ever so slightly towards Summer. Said Rose was doing her best to hide the blush she felt, hiding her cheeks by hiding her face in her coat. Her eyes flicked up at the Uzumakis before the quickly averted themselves. I might be willing to eat that ramen, she asked more than said. Naruto and Yang shared another look before they burst into a fit of giggles. This did not help Summer's embarrassment at all, and she dug her face further into her cloak. The moment was interrupted by a louder and even more monstrous growl. Glancing at his own stomach, Naruto chuckled slightly. Guess I'm a bit hungry as well. After a small meal of slightly stale cupped ramen, Naruto reminded himself to send out a few clones later to buy food. The trio got ready for bed. While Summer was bathing Yang, the Uzumaki got a bit restless and went outside to the terrace before hopping to the roof. As soon as he did, he took note of a presence nearby and turned to see Kashi leaning against the rooftop entrance. Yo! Greeting the Jonin with his signature eye smile and lazy wave. I figured I'd find you up there. Is that right? Of course, considering you were never really one to rest, even if it was for the simple ritual of going to bed, teased the Silverette. The Uzumaki rubbed his head sheepishly at that. Got me there, sensing. So what's up? The Jonin walked over to his student and sat next to him on the roof ledge. Lord Jiraiya told me about your newest discovery. I wanted to make sure he wasn't seeing things no matter how much I trust him. Naruto frowned only slightly, though he could see the merit in his sensei's worry. The blonde lifted his shirt and channeled his chakra. After a moment, if staring, Kakashi gave a low hum. I see. So how did this happen? He inquired, despite already knowing the answer. On the return trip home, answered Naruto. Anyway, I accepted an energy I had come across during the trip and was offered a deal in exchange for the ability to use it to the full extent. And what was the price? What was I supposed to do? If I hadn't accepted, then I wouldn't have been able to control it and might have ended up hurting those around me. The blonde was clearly distressed, and that is something I cannot let happen, no matter what. Without a doubt, said Kakashi after a pause. He stood up. Anyway, you shouldn't worry about that for now. Just focus on the test we'll have tomorrow and bring your best to the table, Naruto. The Uzumaki chuckled at that, making Kakashi raise a brow. Sensei, if I brought my best, then you're going to be in for one hell of a fight. I've learned more than you can imagine on my trip, so you better bring your best. He smirked. Besides, I'm not the only one you should look out for. The Jonin was silent for a moment before he chuckled and returned and left in a body flicker. When he left, Naruto stayed out for several moments longer, enjoying the gentle winds before he went back to his apartment room for some sleep. Upon entering, Naruto felt a warm smile make its way to his face. On his bed lay the two most important people in his life, cuddled up under the blankets in their pajamas while snoring softly. Without a sound, Naruto put on his own night clothes and slipped under the covers behind Summer. Wrapping an arm around the girls, he pulled them closer and gave them each a peck to the cheek. Good night, little dragon, sweet rose. With that, the Uzumaki drifted asleep, not knowing that Summer had been awake the entire time. Melting further into his embrace, a loving smile crossed the rose's lips. Good night, my love. Tomorrow morning, training ground 7. When Naruto, Summer, Sakura, and Yang, having all met up on the way there, showed up at the appointed area at 7:30, they had expected to see Jiraiya, Tsunade, and possibly Kakashi if he actually showed up on time. They, however, were not expecting to see the Rookie 9 along with Team Guy and their respective senseis to be there as well. As they observed the unexpected guests, Naruto took in the changes his old friends had made over the years. The one that stood out the most, at least to him, was Akamaru's drastic increase in size, now being at a startling waist height as opposed to his previous ankle one. The white ninja dog stood tall next to his owner, Kiba Inuzaka, having switched his color scheme from gray to black. Kiba had a leather form-fitting black jacket with zips over the chest and sleeves, along with black pants and sandals, also zipped, matching the jacket. Standing next to him was his two teammates, Shino Aburame and Hinata Hyuga. Shino, having not changed much, wore a calf-length gray jacket with the hood pulled over his head. His eyes were covered by shaded circular glasses. Hinata, on the other hand, was a bit different from before, now wearing a loose-fitting lavender and cream hooded jacket with lavender cuffs over mesh armor and navy blue pants with black low-heeled sandals. She also let her hair grow to reach her waist. Naruto's eyes moved to observe the other teams and took notice of their change in uniform as well. The only one who had not changed in any way was Rock Lee, and judging from his continuous shouts about his flaming passion of youthfulness, his personality hasn't changed much either. All right, a voice snapped the blonde out of his internal musings. Coming back to reality, Naruto realized that they had already entered the clearing, and guessing from the other stunned expressions, they had already been seen. The blonde took notice of the blushes present on all the girls' faces and, despite his confusion, filed the information away for later. However, most of their attention seemed to be focused on Summer and the little blonde girl in her arms. Whispers broke out amongst the group of friends. The voice, Tsunade, continues. This is the test for the reinstatement of Team 7 with the members Naruto Uzumaki, Sakura Haruno, and Summer Rose. Anybody whom I did not mention clear the testing grounds so that they may begin. The other teams and their respective senseis went to the edge of the tree line so they can observe without causing interference. Once in the field, you may begin explaining the rules, as she said to Kakashi, who had arrived without anyone noticing. Before leaping back into the trees, Jiraiya, after taking Yang from Summer, and Tsunade were right behind her. Well then, the same rules as last time apply. There will be only one bell, but the focus of teamwork will still be expected, along with seeing how you've grown, explained Kakashi while the other three nodded. Alright then, you'll start when I say so. This was mainly directed at Naruto, who was reminded of his brash actions during the first bell test. The blonde smirked at his sensei as he lowered himself in a ready stance while his two teammates did the same. They watched as Kakashi lifted his headband over his Sharingan eye and pulled at a kunai. Begin! No sooner than he spoken, Kakashi leaned sharply to the side as a glowing projectile flew past him and into the forest, where it eventually detonated, blowing away the trunk of a tree, causing it to crash to the ground. The silver-haired Jonin's wide eye traced the path of the explosive projectile to his recently returned student and watched as the seemingly innocent and decorative golden bracelet shifted into a pair of gauntlets complete with crimson spikes lining the knuckles. Naruto grinned as he cocked back his arm, which caused a solid cha-ching to be heard, and launching his fist forward, releasing another one of his glowing explosives at the ground underneath Kakashi. Not wanting to lose his feet, the Jonin leapt back to dodge. Just as this happened, he felt someone appear behind him. Turning quickly, he brought up a kunai just in time to block a white and red blade. However, his eyes widened when the blade cut through the metal with ease. Not having enough time to bring up another defense, Kakashi executed a quick seerless substitution and saved himself from being cut in half by the sharp blade. Inwardly patting himself on the back for his quick save, the sensei to Team 7 sweated lightly at the obviously intent to harm if not kill him. The Jonin, despite successfully evading the attacks, couldn't help but feel he was missing something. I hope you didn't forget about me, Kakashi-sensei. Looking up, the silver-haired man deadpanned to himself. Right, there were three of them. Quickly jumping back, Kakashi was not prepared for the subsequent results of Sakura's attack. As soon as her feet touched the ground, it cracked underneath pressure before caving in and kicking up a cloud of dust and debris. Over to the side, Jiraiya gave Tsunade a dry look. You made her into a mirror image of yourself. The Hokage smirked while Tsunade's sweat dropped at his comment. Who knew what kind of trouble Naruto could get into if there wasn't someone like me to keep him in line? The third sage rolled his eyes, seeing a little merit in her inquiry. As far as he knew, Summer was just as capable of calming Naruto down and could do without the use of force. Shielding his eyes, the former Anbu captain missed the dust cloud being parted as Naruto hurled through it. Cocking back his fist once more, the blonde let his fist fly into the Jonin, exploding on contact. Kakashi was thrown back by the blast, swiftly rolling to his feet to cushion to the impact he received quickly, and blocked yet another slash from the sword. Making sure to coat his kunai in chakra, Kakashi managed to successfully block the attack this time, though the blade still managed to cut through half of the metal before stopping, causing them to be left in a deadlock. This also gave him time to observe the weapon. The sword shined lightly in the sun, as if it were recently polished, and though the grip was worn, it was obviously well looked after, being straight with only one side sharp and the other blunt. The blade itself was simple. The coloring held in guard, on the other hand, was another story. The blade was primarily white in color, but had a crimson edge, with the hilt being of the same color as the edge. The guard was designed so that one side, the shorter one, faced upwards, and the opposite side, the lower one, faced downwards, so probably in order to protect the user's knuckles. The hilt, however, he couldn't have made heads or tails of it. It had a bunch of odd shifting mechanisms, and there was a hole at the bottom, making it seem like light yet heavy at the same time. The deadlock lasted for only a few seconds, but it was more than enough time for the Jonin to make his observations. Loosening his grip on his kunai, Kakashi let his opponent stumble forward with a sudden loss of pressure and landed a devastating roundhouse kick, sending the girl flying. Before she could hit the ground and cause further damage to herself, she was caught by Naruto. Sakura quickly engaged Kakashi in a bout of taijutsu to give her new teammate time to recover. "You're right, Summer," he asked gently. The rose nodded and hopped out of his arms. "Yeah, he just caught me by surprise. I won't let it happen again." She tightened her grip on the pommel of her sword before reaching back into her cloak and pulling out a second sword of similar design with opposite colors. Naruto grinned excitedly. "Remember how we took out the other teams during the tournament at Beacon?" Summer nodded slowly, not seeing the point of the question. Suddenly her eyes widened, and a grin similar to the blonde's next to her grew on her face. "Let's do it!" Then they were off. Kakashi, who had been weaving in and out of Sakura's attacks, glanced out at the duo as they began closing in on his position. Sakura, also taking note of her approaching teammates, leapt out of the way of the approaching collision. Before the two reached the Jonin, Naruto pointed both his fists backwards and fired behind him. This caused the blonde's speed to increase suddenly and managed to land the first punch on Kakashi's exposed chest. Launching a swift combo, Naruto landed a few more hits before the Jonin recovered and began to retaliate. The two seemed even for a moment, but Kakashi began to gain the advantage thanks to his Sharingan eye, and just as he was about to exploit and open in Naruto's attack, Summer fell in with a slash from the twin swords. Now having to take on the both of them, the silver-haired Jonin was quickly losing ground, and soon Summer's swords managed to cut into his vest and draw blood just as Naruto jumped up with a spinning kick that sent the Jonin flying as well as causing his vision to spin. Sakura, seeing her chance, jumped at the downed sensei and launched a heavy punch at him. Sharana! Just as before, the ground caved in under the force and would have most likely severely injured Jonin if not for the fact that Kakashi's body exploded into smoke as soon as her fist made contact. "Shadow Clone!" Naruto cursed and began to look around. "Summer, see if you can find him. Sakura and I will defend you." He got a nod from the rose and she extended her senses, attempting to feel him out. Unknown to the others watching, her silver eyes glowed brightly. Briefly, suddenly locating the hidden Jonin, Summer shouted, "Jump now!" Without hesitation, they all jumped into the air just as three pairs of hands emerged from the ground, grasping at where their ankles just were. Acting quickly, Summer stabbed both swords into the ground, causing the clone to disappear. Sakura followed suit and dropped another earth-shattering punch into the ground. The popping noise told them that it was a clone as well, which meant that the one under Naruto was the real one. Instantly, chakra began to form in the palm of his hand, spinning wildly into a ball. Bringing his hand down, he unleashed the devastating jutsu on the ground below him. "Rasengan!" Naruto shouted as he released his signature jutsu on the spot where he believed his sensei to be. The earth detonated as it couldn't contend with the power of his attack. Leaping back out of the resulting dust cloud, Naruto watched to see if he managed to get his sensei. Standing off of the side, the rookie 9 plus team guy watched the battle and all. "When did Naruto get so good?" Choji asked, what was on the forefront of everyone's mind. "Naruto, what about the new girl and her swords?" Tentei said incredulously, stars appearing in her eyes. "They're so beautiful, I'll say." Kiba giggled perversely, but stopped suddenly when he felt the heavy killer intent focus on him. Looking around for the swords, his eyes stopped on the tall form of Jiraiya, but he was not looking at the toad sage. He was staring at the glowing red eyes of the supposed child of Naruto. However, the moment he blinked, the kid's eyes were back to its normal violet color. "What has you so scared, Kiba?" Shikamaru, the ever observant one, took notice of the Inuzaka's shaking form. Kiba looked stunned for a moment before he tried to laugh it out. "Afraid? Ha! Who's afraid? I was just thinking of a funny joke. Right, Hinata?" He tried to turn to his teammate for support, but the Hyuga seemed out of it for the moment as she stared at Naruto with a heavy blush adorned her cheeks. Shikamaru rose an eyebrow at Kiba's odd behavior, but ultimately decided to leave it, deeming the conversation too troublesome to continue. "Yosh! Guy Sensei!" Lee suddenly shouted, his eyes alight with passion. "Naruto-kun has improved upon his inner flames of youth. I shall do the same, starting with 500 laps around Konoha on my hands. If I cannot do this, I must do 1000. Great idea, my star pupil!" An older-looking Lee shouted alongside him. His eyes were lit with the same passion as his mini-clone. "I shall join you, but I shall do 5000. We must not allow our youthful flames to die." Neji sighed at his eccentric teammate's behavior. "While I do not agree with their speech about youth, I must say that they are correct about Naruto's improvement." He spoke to Tenten. A smirk appeared on his face. "It makes me want to train even harder." Tenten nodded. "I know what you mean. He became so much stronger while he was gone. Almost makes me feel as if all my training was for nothing." She sighed. "Well, I guess that means I'll have to try harder. Though I do wonder where he got those gauntlets and where I can get some." "He made them himself." Two members of Team Guy jumped slightly at the sudden intrusion. Turning on their heels, the two came face to face with the Toad Sage. "What?" Tenten asked after a moment of extended silence. "The gauntlets," Jiraiya repeated. "He made them himself." "What?" the bun-haired girl stammered. "There's no way he made those." The white-haired man rolled his eyes. "Of course he made them. I watched him do it myself." He narrowed his eyes. "Or do you doubt my words, girl?" "No, sir." "Good." Neji stepped forward. "I would like to apologize for my teammate's behavior." He glanced over at Lee, who was still ranting about the springtime of youth. "Both of them?" Jiraiya's eyes softened, and he chuckled. "There's no need to apologize," he began. "You just need to remember that this isn't the same Naruto you all knew back then. He has been through some tough times and is a changed man because of it." This piqued Tenten's interest. "That reminds me, Lord Jiraiya, is it true that Naruto has a child now?" Her question grabbed the others' interest, and they waited for the Toad Sage's answer. "Yep, she's over there with Tsunade." He quirked a thumb over his shoulder. The rest turned their attention to the Slug Princess, where she was happily bouncing a small girl with blonde hair in her arms. Yang, having handed it to Tsunade by Jiraiya, who had said that she needed some time to bond with her great-granddaughter, giggled happily at the rapid movements. "That's her," Ino breathed. "She's so cute." A squeal sounded from her as she watched the little girl laugh. "What's her name?" "Yang," Jiraiya answered when everyone's attention was focused back on him. "Yang Uzumaki, cute name," Kiba remarked. The sage nodded in agreement, and the conversation lulled for a moment. "So who's her mother?" Surprisingly, it was Hinata who put on edge to the silence. Jiraiya frowned sadly. "I'm not one who should be asking, but her name was Raven Bronwyn." The sound of a roar brought their attention back to the fight at hand. The dust from Naruto's Rasengan seemed to have forcibly been cleared by a large earth dragon that Kakashi must have just summoned. Shikamaru quickly noticed the way he worded his answer. "Was?" The white-haired man frowned increased. "Now that is something you should ask Naruto. I'm afraid I can't say anything else on the matter other than that she is no longer with us." The group grew solemn after that. The lazy Nara nodded in understanding, but silently contemplated his words in his head. "No longer with us, so she is either dead or she left. I guess I'll have to ask Naruto for more information." He sighed. "Troublesome." Deciding to put the question to the back of his head, Shikamaru paid heed to the evaluation at hand. Naruto squinted his eyes at the large cloud of dust he picked up with his attack. He peered into it as he attempted to locate his sensei. A large pulse of chakra alerted him to the Jonin still being in a fighting condition. Readying his stance once more alongside Summer and Sakura, Naruto awaited Kakashi's appearance. He was, however, not ready for the large dragon, created entirely out of rock, to shoot out of the dust cloud and ram into him. Naruto! Summer shouted in worry. Gasping at the sudden pain, Naruto flipped over the dragon's head and ran down its length before leaping off his tail just as the fireball smacked into him and sent him flying. Getting up and glaring lightly at the silver-haired Jonin, Naruto made the mistake of making eye contact with Kakashi's Sharingan. The tomos of the red-eyed spun lazily as the world disappeared around him, and the sky darkened to night. Naruto took only a moment to notice he was caught in a genjutsu. Ha! You'll have to do better than that, Kakashi-sensei. The Uzumaki put his hands together in the ram sign, but before he could exert the chakra necessary to break the genjutsu, a heart-stopping familiar voice spoke. It's been a while, Uzumaki. Slowly turning in shock, Naruto stared at the crimson eyes of his former lover, Raven Bronwyn. Summer had no idea what happened. One moment, Naruto had looked like he was having the time of his life, sparring against his old sensei. Then the next he was hunched over with his hair shadowing his eyes. His body shook and his fists clenched so hard his knuckles turned white. Labored breaths escaped his lips, and a trail of tears poured out of his left eye. This caused a large amount of concern in the Rose, and she was about to rush to his side when he straightened suddenly. You really shouldn't have done that, Kakashi. His voice was quiet, but the coldness of it left chills in their spines. You could have performed any other kind of genjutsu, but now you've gone and made the wrong decision. The tone grew more and more emotionless with each word, until it began to frighten Sakura and Kakashi. Summer watched on in silent worry. She could never be scared of Naruto, but she knew something clearly had upset him, and it had something to do with Kakashi's genjutsu. But what could have been in that illusion to cause Naruto to cry like that? She hadn't seen him in that state since. Raven. Her eyes flew wide as she began to piece together what happened. Kakashi must have shown Naruto something in relation to the raw Bronwyn, causing him to lose control of his emotions. As she put more thought into it, it began to make more and more sense, and more sense it made the angrier she grew. Kakashi should have known better to show Naruto something like that. It would have only affected his mental state negatively and tear down all that she and Jiraiya worked to build up. Summer felt a growl build up in her throat before she forcibly pushed it back down. Now was not the time to get angry at the silver-haired Jonin. She had to focus on Naruto and make sure he doesn't go on a rampage. However, she decided to not try and stop him from fighting Kakashi. It would help if he got rid of the cause of his negative emotions. Not to say she wouldn't stop Naruto from killing or maiming his own sensei, but she wouldn't be opposed to the idea of the Jonin being roughed up a bit. Some cuts and bruises, maybe a few broken bones. What? Summer may be a nice girl at heart, but if you harm anyone she holds close to her, especially Naruto and Yang, then you would be lucky to get away with your life. She was very protective of those precious to her. Quiet footsteps drew her mind back to the coming confrontation, and she tensed in preparation to move if the need arose. As Naruto drew closer to Kakashi, his face was slowly revealed from the shadows of his bangs. Soon his eyes were visible, and the Jonin nearly felt his heart stop. Naruto's left eye was still the brilliant blue from before, albeit with zero emotion in them, but it was his right eye that caused Kakashi to take a step back. His iris was enveloped in a dark crimson, almost black. His eye colored, and an odd symbol started above his eye and ended in a point below it. Dark energy swirled around the Uzumaki menacingly, and the intensity of it caused the Jonin to sweat. What's happening? Tsunade asked Jiraiya worryingly. The Toad Sage sighed. Kakashi just sighed an all expense paid trip to the hospital for a few days. That's what's happening. What do you mean? Shizune asked in concern of her little brother's figure. Just watch, Jiraiya said calmly, and whatever happens, do not interfere. He aimed this last part at the teams and their senseis. They all nodded their consent, though the Jonin senseis looked reluctant. They still obeyed the wishes of the Toad Sage. Out of sight of the adults, Yang watched her father with concern written clearly on her face. Papa. Uh, Naruto, Kakashi implicated. We can talk about this, right? No need to resort to violence. It was an honest mistake. Her terrific eyes stared at him emotionlessly. Just as he was about to say more, pain erupted in his stomach. Just as he was about to say more, pain erupted from his stomach, staring down, disbelieving at the foot lodged in his gut. Kakashi traced the leg back to its body, where he eventually met the eyes of the Uzumaki. I couldn't react to his movements at all, the Jonin thought incredulously. His Sharingan had been able to see the blonde move, but his body could not react in time to the insane speed Naruto had just displayed. Coughing up a small amount of blood through his mask, Kakashi stumbled away from the offending limb. He, however, was not given the time to recover. Pain flared in his jaw, and suddenly he was airborne. He gritted his teeth. As he spun in the air, he had again seen his movements, but still couldn't react to them in time. Reaching into his pouch, Kakashi launched two kunai at the blonde as hard as he could. Naruto did not make any move to dodge the kunai, and simply watched impatiently as they shattered against his skin. Ignoring the disbelief prominent in the Jonin's eyes, Naruto blurred out of sight and moving slightly slower than before, but it was still too fast for Kakashi's injured body to defend itself. Apparently behind the Jonin, the silver-haired man could only watch as the hand was brought down in a chopping motion, shooting into the ground like a bullet. Kakashi was implanted harshly into the ground. Still not finished, Naruto let gravity pull him to the ground to land on the Jonin's back with his knees, pushing him further into the ground. Getting off of the man, the Uzumaki lifted Kakashi by his hair and held his limp body in front of him with one hand. Holding out his other hand, a Rasengan began to form. However, this was different from the others, as a small, white shuriken-like blade spun around it, making a low, shrieking noise. Jiraiya, having known this particular jutsu Naruto was about to move to stop him, because even though he was severely empowering it, the jutsu was still too dangerous to use on a fellow Leaf Nin. There was no need for him to do anything though, as he already spotted a certain rose on the move. Get ready to get Kakashi out of there, he said to Tsunade. The blonde Hokage nodded and turned to Chizune. As soon as there is an opening, get Kakashi and bring him quickly to me. I must run a quick analysis on his injuries before we take him to the hospital so that he may be treated. Shizune shook her head in response and waited for her moment. Naruto felt that he put enough chakra in his Rasengan and was going to plunge it in the Jonin's chest, but stopped as a familiar warmth suddenly enveloped him from behind, causing him to lose his grip on Kakashi. The now unconscious man fell limply to the ground, where he was immediately picked up by Shizune and taken to Tsunade. Naruto. Summer spoke softly, but with a certain firmness that made the blonde freeze. That's enough now. There's no need to do anything more. Think about Yang. Naruto's crimson eye started to lose some of its crimson black color and began to return to its original one. You wouldn't want to see her upset at the sight of you killing, would you? The blonde glanced at the little girl mentioned. The young blonde had tears threatening to fall out of her watery violet eyes, and her lips quivered in a barely suppressed cry. Slowly but surely the markings around his eyes faded, and he was back to normal. Yang, he whispered. Naruto's body began to sway and his eyes drifted shut as the fatigue from using his power took its toll on him. His legs gave out on him and he felt himself fall. However, he never hit the ground as the arms that were wrapped around him supported his limp body. Struggling to turn his head, the tired blue met a shining silver. Thank you, he managed to say before his mind shut down alongside his body, dragging him into the dark embrace of unconsciousness. The last thing he heard before he fully fell into oblivion was a soft and sweet voice telling him everything will be okay. End of chapter 2.